This is a journey. This is a journey.
Look, if you had one shot,
ideologically. Okay, so back to some of this. Says in Romans, said, note those that cause divisions, right? And I'm going to say, note how they cause divisions as well. And I want you to see it. I'm going to give you some pictures for you to kind of see it. These are obvious, but not all the time, okay? The black and white thing, man, they're playing that like crazy right now. And they do it every election cycle. The rich and the poor, those are also talking points for them. You know, I'm out for the poor and you're out for the rich. You know, Republican, Democrat. You know, I heard this a few times. You know, they're basically two wings of the same bird, and I would agree. Very often it's like that. You know, you have to really judge people, you know, in these areas, you know, by their fruit, not by their let's say their declaration of political party or whatever. You know, not anybody who wants to be a politician, you know, they don't got much of a choice. They usually have to choose one or the other. There's a handful that maybe can make it as you know, independence, but it's not common. So the other thing you see played out as an East Coast, West Coast, you see that being played out in like in gangster rap and different things too, you know, even within sports, you know, the Western Division, the Eastern Division, and so forth. The ideologies, the liberals and versus the conservatives, you know, we talked about that earlier. Capitalism, you know, this is the form of economics, etc., but also in governments. But capitalism versus communism, you know, then there's moral things that they point out too. You're pro-life, I'm pro-choice, etc. So, you know, there's all these different ways that are designed to. They've purposely designed them to be divided in their, you know, in their way of moving forward. Okay, how does it end up playing out? Well, in one instance, the North versus the South, the you know, country versus the city, you know, the Civil War. East Coast, West Coast. You know, I think most of you knew that was a heated time too with Tupac and Biggie, and so they, you know, there's still probably, I don't know if there, well, maybe not. I'm kind of out of that, but you know, where there's a division between East Coast rap and or style and music versus West Coast. You know, the picture down here on the left bottom, you know, has to do with protests and different things like that. You know, a lot of times that's the ideologies or, you know, the political interests, and they form groups in order, or just say community organizers, you know, form these groups to oppose, you know, government and or, you know, positions, laws, whatever it is, you know. But then there's also the division that's always caused in the church, and that's the one that, you know, I dislike the most, of course. But you know, a lot of times it's understandable because there's sheep in wolves clothing, and they come in and they're you know, that's what they're gonna do. They want to cause a division, and they do a lot of things to do it. You know, I'm particularly experienced at recognizing a lot of those things, having been in the church for, you know, 20 plus years. But one of the things I like to do is kind of show you by an example, like, how does it work? Like, how do they work it? It would be just as simple as this. Okay. And I use this all over for the people that I minister to. A lot of times they've heard me say this before, but let's just say you have a preference. One is milk chocolate, and let's say your friend or whatever, his preference is dark chocolate. And there's no problem as long as, you know, there's that freedom for you to get yours and them to get theirs, no big deal. But if I start talking about making a law to ban, you know, dark chocolate because I prefer milk chocolate, I instantly create a division. I instantly make a division. The people who are, you know, like dark chocolate right away are going to oppose that law. So, let's say they say, instead of them saying, no, we should just leave it as is, they say, no, we should ban milk chocolate. Now you got them opposing each other. Now you have two factions, or two groups opposing one another. And it's that simple for them to create division. So we have to be pretty sharp to kind of see through all that. Okay. That's very important. And they have these techniques. And in fact, a lot of these things, they teach them at the university level and college level of classes, in different, studies and so forth. And, from what I've experienced, and I've gone to junior college, I haven't been to university, but from what I've heard and seen and studied, etc., a lot of this is kind of brought in as if, it's an idea, or they're just relaying information. But the truth is, they're revering a lot of that information and the people that have brought it forth, to the point where our kids are very impressionable at that time, and they're looking for purpose in life, and they're looking to establish themselves in their own vision for their future, etc. And the enemy very often seizes that opportunity. But so here are how they do this, okay? And I'll make it a little bit simpler, but let's say the synthesis is part, or rather the agenda is part of what their goal is, in order to achieve their goal. The centralization of powers. What do? They have the thesis. It's like me saying, I think we should only have dark chocolate. So what do? In this case, they manufacture, or they create a threat, a terrorist threat in this example. So then automatically that creates an antithesis, or what do we need to combat that terrorist threat? Well, we need to have a police force, right? So let's say they hire more police, or they move military troops into the region, or something like that. And then the result is the synthesis, the removal of freedoms, the transfer of power from the many to the few. And just like that, they were able to group up all the power into their hand. You're seeing that right now with this whole quarantine, this exact thing being played out, the Hegelian dialectic, how to manipulate everybody under their control, cause a few riots, let out a sickness, whatever, group the people together, send out the police force. In this case, they're trying to get rid of the police, and they want to bring in UN police. Why? Because the UN police are not loyal to our government. They have a much broader perspective about who their loyalties belong to. And they know that, and that's why they want to try to bring that in. But it's also like this. It's as simple as they create a problem to get us to react, to receive the solution from us. The solution would be the agenda in this case. The solution would be what they were after the whole time. And they just break it down or work it backwards, and before you know it, they're able to do that. Okay? So what do? We have to pray. Those are the prayer points. So many of those things. A lot of this stuff, some of it, if not most of it, is in one sense out of our control. Unless we are part of that system. Whether it's entertainment or political or whatever. But I can't drive this home enough that any of these things you become aware of, you just start talking to God right there where you're at. Start praying and telling him, Lord, don't let them do this, Father God. Don't let them be able to, seize control of this area, or don't let them be able to stop the flow of supplies here, or oppress the people there, etc. Any of those things where you become aware, I say right then and there you can intercede. If you can do, you could do it like the verse that I always use, on your bed like a two-edged sword, and bind up their kings. But you want to do it as soon as God brings it up to you, at least so that you don't forget about it. you can say a lot of prayers. The Lord does know your heart. The Lord will hear your voice, your inner voice. And I would advise it. That's what we need to do. I think more than anything, those prayers go a long ways. If you look at the book of Revelation, you see that those prayers are filling up a bowl of judgment that's going to be poured out, and sometimes I believe is poured out, just not in its full measure. So their government, what is their government? Well, I showed you that picture earlier. This one might be, I think it's the same picture, but there's other pictures that are similar. And it was the Tower of Babel, correct? And so now I'm showing you an actual building on the right. And I don't know if any of you know what that building is, but you can look it up. But there's obvious similarities, purposeful similarities to this painting. Okay, that's why they're there. So here's another picture of that same building with internet, with flags from all over the world, and including, I see the EU flag, which is already a combination of nations. And I don't always point this out. I think I have another picture that points out most of it, but this is the EU Parliament building, if I remember correctly. And I showed you some parts of it earlier, and I'll show you again here in a moment. But see, these statues are all things, and I think there's other ones around the building, all around the building. And earlier I showed you this statue that was one of them that's around the building, the woman riding the beast. Okay, well, the symbolism for that and the story, you can look that up, of Europa. But these other statues they've placed here, and you got to stop and think, why are they putting statues of mythological characters and or stories? And you might be thinking, well, I just thought they wanted to have an appreciation for the art and culture of those regions or whatever. I can understand why we would think that. We've been kind of geared to think that way. But when you understand what those stories are actually symbolizing, you start seeing the reality behind it. Why is there a European Union to begin with? Instead of sovereign nations, they're uniting them in steps. They're getting their one world government in steps, and that's always been the plan, because they're not going to be able to take it over militarily. They've tried that in some ways, but it doesn't really work. It's too vast. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Next slide here. This is just a picture of the inside of the United Nations building. I mean, look at all these people here, government officials representing the nations of the world. I mean, you could say that they have a one world, governance of some sort, but it's only up to whatever we agree in. They unless they're going to all unite and come in militarily, it's always going to have to depend on our leaders and whether or not they've sold us out to these elites of the world. Okay, these merchants, these rulers and kings, etc. That's always going to be the thing we fall back on. Okay, now this is a room inside of the United Nations. It's actually designated as a prayer room where people can go in and say prayers. And I did know at one point what that painting was supposed to be represent or something like that, but I will just make mention of this because it's like, what is a prayer room doing in there? Why would they need that? Do they have some kind of religious component to their unity? And I would say absolutely. The United Nations, I would rather call them the conspiring nations, or the leaders of nations, the conspirators. But they do. They actually, you can go on their website. I haven't been there for years, actually. But when I used to originally study this, and they actually have a webpage for their religion, like their religious beliefs. And it's basically one of those, everybody's included or something like that, some kind of garbage. Okay, so now these are the sign. It says the Trinity of globalist control. I wouldn't want to, and I'm not saying this is the only ones that exist, because the reality is they are all over the world, but these are the main players, I think, by far, okay, of how they're uniting themselves, okay. Religiously, the harlot, the Mystery Babylon harlot is running its religious components through the Vatican, okay. You would be, I think, off the mark, to some degree, of course, if you boiled it down, because a lot of people do this, and I think this is where we kind of lose a little bit in the process, is that you start to think, oh, it's the Vatican that is controlling everything. And I would say no. There's pictures of the Pope and popes throughout history kissing the Rothschilds' hands, and different things like that. They are an aspect of it. Remember, they have different aspects and aspirations, and so they have different organizations to carry them out. The Vatican, I think, though, for the most part, is the most powerful religious component, and you see the Pope at work trying to unite all the world's religions. Okay, I mean, such a disgrace, to even think he's Christian. I'm not buying it for a second, but okay. Then there's the City of London, and ever since the British Empire, they have controlled the finances of our world for so long. So many of the bankers, etc., have come out of that region, and they're all over the place now, but they definitely are still a powerhouse in that area. Okay, but so are we in a lot of ways. The United States, through the dollar, but for the most part, we are the military strength to this whole globalist agenda, and that's one of the reasons why they're having such a hard time with the United Nations right now. It should be obvious if you don't look at it correctly, but it should be obvious that that Donald Trump is not with their agenda. He's dismantling and disassociating us with so many of their united efforts. You could say their conspiratorial efforts, whether it was trade deals or the organizations, some of the more recent ones were the trade deals that were made, but also with like the World Health Organization. We just got us out of that mess, where we're just kicking money into that. And those are just payoffs, ways to launder money and get it to all their people that have sold out their countries, But the military might of the United States has been one of the tools. Of course, we've been made to think, and this isn't, look, I served in the military for 4 years, so I'm totally, I'm love the military, and there's a lot of things that woke me up while I was there, that as to why I don't have a career in it, but I still care about the military and our veterans, and but I want the military to serve our country's interests and not these globalist sellout, especially our politicians, that send the military over to places to carry out really their agenda. That's what happened in Iraq. Saddam Hussein basically was going to start making his own money. And so, like I said earlier, we went in, called him a dictator, went in and opened up a can of democracy. And, that thing, is still a thorn in the side of, a lot of the Middle East as well as us. Because a lot of things, have come out from that as well. But, we've done it in other countries as well. Thinking we're keeping back the tide of communism, but the reality is we're keeping a division in a lot of those places on purpose to keep up the image or illusion that the control is not united. For example, we're made to think that Iran is opposed to the United States. Well, it's not the people, and in fact, I can't say that for everybody, of course, but the government officials really are of Iran, mostly have sold out to our CIA or our deep state, and that's and they want to keep it like that, where they can do a lot of their deeds over there and use that country as a tool. So, in that sense, they want that division. They want Iran to be an enemy to the United States so they can use it to manipulate us. Okay. But here's something I just to point out, like it says down here, all three are separate states, completely independent of their respective countries. A lot of people don't know that. I haven't really looked at the one in London, like I said earlier as well, but I know the Vatican, even though it's in Italy, they are really like sovereign over their little, part of land right there. The same thing goes with the District of Columbia in Washington. And if you research about it, your eyes can be opened up big time. If you looked into this more, you would realize, hey, they're really not governed by our country. Now why think about this for a second? Why would our government leaders design a place where they are basically I can't think of the word, but immune to the laws of our country? They make their own little laws within the district to govern themselves in there, and that's to protect them in the courts. And now a lot of that stuff hasn't played out for them, but it's like anybody in the know kind of knows that, like, hey, wait a minute, this is kind of set up to where, even though we're governing the United States, we're not part of the United States as long as we're in here. It's like you're being in your own little region apart, almost like being in an Indian reservation or something,